Your dog trots up to your cat, tail wagging, eyes bright, body loose, and wiggling with excitement. Your cat's ears flatten, her back arches. Within half a second, she is hissing, swatting, gone. You assume they simply don't like each other. But the real answer is far stranger. Your cat and your dog aren't failing to get along. They're speaking two completely different languages, using the exact same body parts, and neither one has any idea they're being misunderstood. You've probably heard someone say cats and dogs are natural enemies. That phrase gets repeated so often it starts to sound like biology. It isn't. Wolves and wildcats never evolved some ancient blood feud. What they evolved instead were two entirely separate social operating systems, built for two entirely different kinds of lives. Put those systems in the same apartment, the same food bowl, the same 3 square meters of living room floor, and the wires cross constantly. Start with the tail, because the tail is where most of the confusion begins. A dog's wagging tail usually signals arousal. And arousal isn't the same thing as happiness. It can mean excitement. It can mean uncertainty. Depending on the speed, height, and stiffness of the wag, it can even signal the early stages of aggression. Most of the time, though, a loose, low, sweeping wag really does mean friendly interest. Dogs evolved that signal for a reason, and it usually works on other dogs. Now watch a cat's tail. Slow, low, side-to-side lashing isn't a greeting. It's a warning. It means the cat is irritated, overstimulated, or bracing for something. A cat flicking just the tip of her tail while staring at you isn't inviting a belly rub. She's telling you, in the clearest language available to her, to back off. So when a dog bounds over with a wagging tail meant as an invitation, the cat doesn't read invitation. She reads threat. And the dog, watching the cat hiss and swipe, has no idea what just happened, because in his language, he did absolutely nothing wrong. Why would two species end up with body language this contradictory? The answer goes back millions of years, long before either animal ever met a human. Dogs descended from wolves, and wolves are radically social animals. A wolf pack survives because its members can read each other constantly, second by second, to avoid real physical fights over food, mates, and territory. That pressure produced an enormous vocabulary of appeasement signals: lowered bodies, play bows, averted eyes, exposed bellies. Wolves needed fast, reliable ways to say, "I am not a threat," because a pack that fought over every disagreement wouldn't survive a single season. Cats took an entirely different evolutionary road. Their ancestor, Felis sylvestris libica, the African wildcat, was a solitary hunter. She didn't live in a pack. She didn't need to negotiate rank with siblings every morning over a shared kill. Anthrozoologist John Bradshaw, who spent decades studying domestic cat behavior at the University of Bristol, has documented how much of a house cat's body language still reflects that solitary ancestry, even 10,000 years after domestication began. Cats never faced strong evolutionary pressure to develop elaborate signals of submission, because for most of their history, there was no hierarchy to submit within. Their signals evolved almost entirely around one question: is this a threat? Yes or no? There is very little middle ground. That single difference explains nearly every misunderstanding you'll ever watch unfold on your living room floor. Take eye contact. To a dog raised around people, especially one that's well socialized, a soft, brief gaze can build trust. But a hard, unbroken stare from another animal reads as a challenge, and dogs sense it instinctively, even when they've learned to tolerate it from humans. Cats are even more sensitive to this. A direct, sustained stare from anything, dog, cat, or person, gets read as predatory. Ever notice how a nervous cat finally relaxes the moment you look away, or slow blinks at you once your gaze softens? That slow blink isn't random. It's one of the only no harm signals a cat has, evolved from the simple act of briefly closing eyes that would otherwise be locked in a threat stare. You do this with your own cat more often than you'd guess, too, not just with the dog beside her. Purring gets treated, almost universally, as a sound of pure contentment. Sometimes it is. But cats also purr when they're in pain, when they're anxious, even while giving birth, using the same low vibration to self-soothe a nervous system under real stress that they use to signal comfort on a lazy afternoon. Kneading, that rhythmic pressing of paws into a blanket or your lap, traces back to nursing behavior from kittenhood, and it can show up during moments of both deep relaxation and mild anxiety. You've likely spent years assuming one meaning for signals that were never that simple to begin with, which tells you something important before you even get to the dog. You were mistranslating this language solo, long before another species got involved. Applied animal behaviorist Patricia McConnell has spent a career studying exactly these cross-species mismatches, and her research points to something you've probably never thought about. Your own body language is primate body language. Humans, like other primates, tend to approach things they like head-on. You make eye contact to build connection. You hug, you lean in, you reach out with open hands. Every one of those instincts, so natural you never question them, reads as confrontational to a dog and outright threatening to a cat. You are not just watching two animals mistranslate each other. You're a third language in the room. And you've been getting mistranslated the entire time too. Think about the last time you scooped up an unfamiliar dog and hugged it. To you, that's affection. To many dogs, being wrapped up and immobilized by something looming over them is closer to a threat display than a cuddle. Most dogs tolerate it because repeated experience has taught them that hugging humans usually ends without harm. That tolerance is learned, though, not instinctive. Cats rarely get the same chance to learn it, because cats are handled less predictably and startle far more easily. So when you reach toward a cat the same confident, head-on way you'd greet a dog, you're speaking the one dialect she is evolutionarily wired to fear most. Now add the belly into the picture. A dog rolling onto his back is often, though not always, a sign of relaxation or submission. Sometimes it really is an invitation. A cat rolling onto her back is almost never that. Dog cognition researcher Alexandra Horowitz, who studies canine perception at Barnard College, has written extensively about how differently animals experience identical physical spaces, borrowing a concept from biologist Jakob von Uexküll called the Umwelt. The idea that every species inhabits its own private sensory and perceptual world, even while sharing the exact same room. Your dog's Umwelt and your cat's Umwelt overlap in square footage and almost nowhere else. A cat exposing her belly usually isn't asking for a rub. She's exposing her most vulnerable, most heavily armed surface. 4 sets of claws, cocked and ready to strike if you're foolish enough to accept what looks like an invitation. So picture the scene again, the one you probably already know from your own living room. The dog bounds over, tail wagging, ready to play, maybe even flopping onto his back mid-approach as a friendly overture. The cat sees a large, fast-moving animal making direct eye contact, tail flicking, coming straight at her, head-on. Every signal the dog sends, in his own language, reads as escalation in hers. She hisses. She swats. The dog yelps and backs off, utterly confused, because he wasn't threatening anything. He was trying to make a friend the only way he knows how. There's a second layer to this mismatch that most people never even notice, and it lives in the ears and whiskers. A dog's ears pinned flat and back usually mean fear or submission. A cat's ears, pinned flat and back, usually mean the opposite. They mean an attack may be seconds away. Whisker position tells a similar story. Cat whiskers pushed forward and rigid signal alertness or aggression, while whiskers flattened against the face signal fear. Dogs don't have whiskers doing any comparable signaling work, so a dog has no instinctive way to read that channel at all. It's simply a frequency he can't tune into, no matter how much he wants to understand what's happening in front of him. Then there's the play bow, a signal so specifically canine that it barely translates outside the dog world at all. Front legs stretched flat to the ground, rear end raised in the air, tail often wagging above it. The play bow is a dog's clearest possible sentence. It means everything that happens next is a game, not a real fight, not a real chase, not a real bite. Wolves use it, foxes use it. Domestic dogs use it constantly with each other, and puppies often learn to recognize it before they learn much else. Cats have no equivalent gesture, because cats never needed one. Solitary hunters don't play fight in structured group sessions the way social carnivores do. So, a dog bowing playfully in front of a cat isn't misread as hostile most of the time. It's simply not read at all. It vanishes into a silence where no signal exists on the other end. Even sound gets lost in translation. A dog's excited barking, to another dog, carries real information, pitch and rhythm shifting for excitement, warning, distress, or greeting. To a cat, barking mostly registers as one thing: loud, sudden, and close. Cats rely far more heavily on subtle, quiet communication, tiny shifts in posture, the faintest chirrup, a slow blink from across a room. A cat raised without early exposure to dogs has no framework for parsing canine noise at all. It's simply volume without vocabulary. And volume alone, to a solitary hunter's nervous system, reads as danger. A 2008 study published in the journal Applied Animal Behavior Science looked directly at what makes cat and dog households work and what makes them fail. Researchers Noah Feuerstein and Joseph Turkel examined dozens of homes where both animals lived together, and one pattern stood out clearly. Households where the dog and cat were introduced to each other while one of them was still young, inside the narrow developmental window when a kitten or puppy's brain is most open to forming new social categories, ended up with far calmer, friendlier relationships than households where two fully grown adults met for the first time. A kitten's socialization window closes by roughly 7 weeks of age. A puppy's stays open a little longer, into the early months. Miss that window, and both animals are left relying entirely on adult instinct, with no learned exception ever installed. Which is, in essence, two native speakers meeting for the first time with no shared vocabulary and no translator in the room. Here's the counterintuitive part, though. The part that changes how you'll see every cat and dog household from now on. It was never really a two-way miscommunication. It's a three-way one, and you are the third party. Every time you've read a cat's stillness as calm, when it was actually frozen tension. Every time you've read a dog's excited barking as aggression, when it was arousal or anxiety or simple overstimulation. Every time you've reached for a stiff, wide-eyed cat because she wasn't doing anything, you were running the exact same mistranslation the dog runs, just with a slightly larger vocabulary and noticeably worse instincts. Your species evolved to read faces, eyes, and open gestures. Theirs didn't. You've been guessing this entire time, and more often than you'd like to admit, you've been guessing wrong. Once you know this, the fighting starts to look less like hostility and more like a language barrier. The animal equivalent of two people shouting louder because the other one still isn't responding, when the real problem was never volume. It was vocabulary. Households that successfully integrate cats and dogs almost always do it through careful management rather than hope. Slow, controlled introductions. Separate safe spaces the cat can retreat to and the dog can't follow into. Positive associations built gradually across weeks instead of forced into a single afternoon. Giving each animal room to learn the other's signals, instead of trusting instinct alone to sort it out. It was never about forcing tolerance. It's about translation. And this is where the story stops being about pets at all. Because you do this exact thing with people every single day, and you rarely notice you're doing it. You read someone's silence as anger when it was exhaustion. You read someone's directness as rudeness when it was simply how they were raised to communicate honestly. You read someone pulling away as rejection when it was their own particular, learned version of needing space. Every close relationship you've ever had contains some version of the dog wagging his tail while the cat reads a threat. Two people, each acting in good faith, each fluent in a language the other never formally learned. Do you remember a moment when you were certain you were being kind, and it landed as anything but? Somewhere in that gap was a mistranslation almost identical to the one playing out on your living room floor. Families raised in different households develop different dialects of affection, the same way kittens and puppies develop different dialects of body language, and almost nobody sits down and translates them for each other before the relationship begins. One person's silence means comfort. Another person's silence means distance. One person shows love by fixing your problem the moment you mention it. Another shows love by simply sitting with you inside the problem, saying nothing or waiting. Neither one is wrong. They're running two different operating systems, installed early, rarely questioned, and almost never explained out loud. In exactly the same way, a kitten and a puppy each grow up fluent in a language the other was never taught. The fights that follow rarely start from malice. They start the same way the hiss and the wagging tails start, from good intentions colliding with the wrong dialect. Maybe that's the real reason this dynamic feels so familiar to you, even before you understood the biology behind it. You've lived it, not with claws and fur, but with the people closest to you, whose signals you've misread more than once, and who have almost certainly misread yours right back. It's rarely malice. It's almost never a lack of love. It's translation, or the absence of it, happening quietly beneath the surface of nearly every interaction you've ever had, human or otherwise. So the next time you watch your dog approach your cat, tail wagging, utterly sure he's being friendly, and your cat hisses, utterly sure she's being threatened, try watching it differently. You're not looking at two animals who dislike each other. You're watching two ancient separate languages collide in real time, in your own living room, with you standing right in the middle, fluent in neither, and closer to both of them than you ever realized.